Hi there, legal writers. Welcome to this Legal Grammar Redux video series with me, Jill Barton, from the University of Miami School of Law. In this video series, I am covering 12 grammar topics, which are covered in more detail in chapters 19 through 21 in the handbook for the new legal writer. And those topics are listed here. They include 8 grammar basics and 4 more advanced grammar principles. In this video, we are talking about the last advanced grammar principle, parentheses, and my favorite, em dashes. So first, let's talk about parentheses. You see these a lot in legal writing, and you see them mostly in citations. But first, let's talk about parentheses as a grammatical form within a sentence. So here we have a couple examples. The first is from Justice Gorsuch. The next two are from Justice Kagan. And in the first example, Justice Gorsuch exemplifies how we use parentheses, and that is to add secondary information. It's not essential to the sentence. It's just adding a little extra information, and it's kind of whispering it to the reader, which is different from a comma, which offsets information, or an em dash, which really calls attention to the information that it is those em dashes are surrounding. So here, Justice Gorsuch writes, if asked by a friend rather than a judge why they were fired. So he's just adding a little extra information, a phrase, all lowercase, within the parentheses. In these next two examples, Justice Kagan has complete sentences within the parentheses, but she does these two sentences a little differently. So first, let's take a look at the middle example here. She writes, the next clause, but don't get attached. It will soon be superseded. Set out the procedures the electors were to follow in casting their votes. So here, Justice Kagan has a complete sentence within that parentheses, but she keeps it all lowercase, and she just keeps it in there as an aside. Don't get attached is a command. That's a complete sentence. It has a colon offsetting what could otherwise also be a sentence. That is, it will soon be superseded. She's just adding a witty aside, a witty remark here, and kind of hiding it in parentheses. And she's hiding it within the middle of a sentence. She doesn't want to break up the flow of a sentence, so she doesn't add any periods or capitalization to make that seem like a sentence on its own. Now, that's different from the next example, where she is adding an additional sentence, additional information to her previous sentence. And this parenthetical reads, one might think of this as fodder for a new season of Veep. Again, with a witticism from Justice Kagan. And here you can see she starts that with a capital letter, and she ends this parenthetical with a period inside. That shows that the sentence is contained within that parenthetical, and that's the proper way to do parentheses like that. We see citations or parentheses even more in citations, and here are a couple examples from Justice Ginsburg. We often see parentheticals following a case citation with a word like citing or affirming or finding or stating, these ing verbs that describe what happened in the case. Here, Justice Gorsuch writes citing, and then she has another case. The next example of a parenthetical shows a complete sentence. And the couple tricky things about this is that it begins, of course, with a capital letter that indicates it is a sentence. Justice Ginsburg writes, perhaps because, and she ends that with a period inside the parentheses, right after the word revenue. That ends the sentence within the parentheses, and then we have another period at the end of this parenthetical to show that the citation sentence is complete. Every single citation ends with a period. That's what that final period is doing there. Citations are called citation sentences, even though we usually drop off the word sentence. So that period ends the citation sentence here. Another way you might see parentheticals used in legal writing is to just add a little extra information in a string citation. And we see that example here where we have very short phrases or just single words to describe something that the writer wants to get across. This sentence reads, discrete groups in our society often have been excluded from jury pools. And it has a series of cases with parentheticals describing which of those discrete groups the writer is referring to. The first one says women, the second, daily wage earners, the third, Mexican Americans, and so forth. And while this is a string citation, which is a little long and obviously complicated, we want to use string citations only rarely in legal writing. This is one very effective way to put forth a lot of helpful information to your reader in a pretty concise format. It's a very effective way to do that. So we've talked about parentheses and how they de-emphasize information. The exact opposite of that is using em dashes to call attention to information. And this is one of my favorite punctuation marks because I think it does that so well. And I think it's one of Justice Kagan's as well. We have some more examples from her. So we can use em dashes a couple of different ways within a sentence. First, we can interject information within the middle of a sentence by setting it off with em dashes. So this first example from Justice Kagan reads, "The court then," there's a dash, "quite sensibly," another dash, "remanded the case to the South Carolina Supreme Court." So she's really wanting to emphasize that this is a sensible decision, and she's setting that off with em dashes. The next em dash phrase, also in the middle of a sentence, is just a little bit longer. So there's no rule whether it should be a word or a short phrase or a long phrase. This example here shows a longer phrase. Justice Kagan writes, "The familiar symbol of the Red Cross, a red cross on a white background." So here she's giving more information. She wants to make sure the reader sees this description. We often read over parentheticals when you're reading all those cases and all those long parentheticals, you often read over them. But for some reason, these em dashes really call attention by pointing to information. And she's calling attention to that information here. We can also use em dashes at the end of a sentence. So you see in these examples, there is just one single em dash because it's setting off information at the end of the sentence. This first example is also from Justice Kagan, and you can see this is a much longer em dash phrase that finishes the sentence with a period at the end. And the second example here is from Chief Justice Roberts. He is describing why the dusky gopher frog is dusky. He writes dusky because of its dark coloring and gopher because it lives underground. So he's giving some information to the reader describing that phrase dusky gopher frog and setting that off and calling attention to it by using the em dash. So that's how you use parentheses and em dashes. I just want to end by reminding you that everyone can be a great legal writer. If you've watched all of these videos, congratulations, and I hope to see you next time.